Every year, usually in the second week of January, a small group of men receive a piece of mail that money simply cannot buy. A thick, cream-colored envelope postmarked directly from Augusta, Georgia. Inside is a formal invitation to play in the Masters. But for the men receiving it, it is not just an invitation. It is a guarantee, a lifelong promise. Win the Masters once, and you can play the tournament for the rest of your life. That was the unwritten rule. That was the magic of the green jacket. You earn it once, and nobody can ever take it away from you. Until one year, they did. This is the story of the secret Masters blacklist. A moment in golf history so quietly ruthless, so completely contrary to the traditions of the sport, that Augusta National spent years trying to sweep it under the rug. It wasn't about a failed drug test. It wasn't about a criminal record. It was about something much more controversial: control. The men in the green jackets decided that a lifelong promise was no longer convenient. And with a single batch of letters, they quietly ended the careers of some of the most respected champions in the history of the sport. This didn't happen in public. It happened in the shadows. And to understand how a tradition this sacred was broken, you have to look at the man who broke it, the secret meetings that led to it, and the moment the entire locker room realized that their green jackets came with a hidden expiration date. Honestly, I think this is the most cold-blooded corporate move in the history of major championship golf. Do you agree? Drop your take in the comments right now. I read every single one. And if behind-the-scenes golf coverage is your thing, hit subscribe. That is exactly what this channel is built for. But before we get to the names on that blacklist, you have to understand the power of the lifetime exemption. The Masters is not like the US Open or the PGA Championship. Augusta National is a private club. They answer to no one. They do not have to follow the rules of the PGA Tour. They do not have to listen to the USGA. They invite whoever they want, whenever they want. But for decades, they operated on one unbreakable code: the past champions. Clifford Roberts, the co-founder of the tournament, established it. He believed that the fans wanted to see the legends. He believed that a champion earned the right to walk those fairways until the day he could no longer physically swing a club. For 70 years, that rule was sacred. You had guys in their 60s, their 70s, teeing it up on Thursday morning. They weren't going to win. They weren't going to make the cut. But they were there. It was a celebration of history. And then came the television era. And with it came Hootie Johnson. William Hootie Johnson took over as chairman of Augusta National in 1998. He came from the banking world. He was a businessman who understood leverage, optics, and power. He didn't look at the Masters as just a golf tournament. He looked at it as a premium global television product. And when he looked at his television product in the early 2000s, he saw a problem. Tiger Woods had arrived. The game was getting faster, stronger, and much, much longer. Augusta National was forced to lengthen the golf course. They added hundreds of yards. They grew out the rough. They planted trees. They tiger-proofed the most famous piece of property in golf. But there was a side effect to tiger-proofing Augusta. The course became an absolute monster. And the older past champions, the guys in their 60s and 70s who had been playing purely on tradition, were suddenly being eaten alive. We are not talking about missing the cut by a few strokes. We are talking about scores that looked like weekend handicappers. In 2001, Doug Ford, the 1957 Masters champion, played the first round and shot a 94 on national television. Billy Casper, one of the greatest putters in history, the 1970 champion, was struggling to break 85. Gay Brewer, the 1967 champion, was physically exhausted, just walking the hills. For the fans, it was tough to watch, but it was part of the charm. It was tradition. For Hootie Johnson, it was an embarrassment. He felt that seeing past champions shooting in the 90s damaged the prestige of the brand. He believed it took up tee times that could go to younger, more competitive international players. He wanted them gone. But you cannot just uninvite a Masters champion. You cannot just tell a man with a green jacket that he isn't welcome anymore. It violates the very foundation of the tournament. So, Hootie Johnson didn't do it in public. He did it in private. In the winter of 2002, a letter arrived at the homes of Doug Ford, Billy Casper, and Gay Brewer. It wasn't the usual cream-colored invitation. It was a formal, typed letter from the chairman himself, and the wording was chillingly polite. It didn't ask them to consider retiring. It didn't suggest that the course was getting too long. It simply informed them that their playing days at the Masters were over. When you look at the exact wording of Hootie Johnson's letter, it is a masterclass in corporate detachment. It read, in part, "We believe that the time has come to respectfully ask that you no longer participate in the Masters tournament. Respectfully ask." In the language of Augusta National, a respectful ask is not a request. It is an eviction notice. The letter went on to say, "Your past victories have given you a place in the history of the Masters, and you will always be a cherished part of our tradition. Cherished. As long as you stay off the first tee. A lifelong promise, revoked in a single piece of mail." When those letters were opened, the reaction wasn't just disappointment. It was fury. Doug Ford was 79 years old. He knew he wasn't going to win, but he had earned the right to make that decision for himself. Billy Casper was heartbroken. Gay Brewer was insulted. These were men who had helped build the Masters into what it was. They had given their best years to the tournament, and now they were being discarded because their scores didn't look good on a television graphic. But the real explosion didn't happen with the older players. It happened when the rest of the locker room found out. Word travels fast in professional golf. And when the active players heard that Augusta National was actively revoking the playing privileges of past champions, a shockwave went through the sport. Because if they could do it to Doug Ford, they could do it to anyone. Jack Nicklaus, the greatest champion in Masters history, a man with 6 green jackets, was quietly seething. Arnold Palmer, the king of the sport, was completely caught off guard. These were the men who protected the traditions of the game, and they were seeing those traditions ripped apart by a banking executive. Fuzzy Zoeller, never one to bite his tongue, was openly critical. He said what everyone else was whispering: "You don't do that to a Masters champion." Gary Player, a man who treats Augusta like a second home, was visibly conflicted. He understood the need for the tournament to look professional, but the execution? The cold, calculated nature of a mailed letter? That violated the unspoken brotherhood of the champions. The media eventually got wind of the letters, and the backlash was immediate. Golf writers called it classless. Fans called it a betrayal. Hootie Johnson had underestimated the emotional connection that the public had with the past champions. He thought he was protecting the tournament's prestige. Instead, he made Augusta National look like a soulless corporation. Faced with a massive public relations disaster, Johnson tried to pivot. He released a statement claiming that the letters were sent to save the older players from the embarrassment of playing a course that was now too difficult for them. He claimed he was protecting their legacies. The players weren't buying it. Not for a second. The tension in the champions' locker room that April was suffocating. You had guys sitting next to each other, knowing that some of them had been secretly exiled. The lifetime exemption, the ultimate prize in professional golf, was suddenly revealed to be a conditional contract. But here is the part that nobody talks about. The part that shows just how calculated Augusta National really is. Instead of apologizing and reinstating the lifetime exemption, the committee quietly doubled down. They realized that sending secret letters was a bad look. So, they decided to change the rules officially. In 2003, Augusta National announced that moving forward, past champions would only be allowed to play until they reached the age of 65. After 65, your exemption was permanently revoked. They instituted a hard age limit. The lifetime promise was officially dead. And who was the first high-profile victim of this new rule? Jack Nicklaus. Nicklaus was approaching his mid-60s. The new rule meant that the greatest player in the history of the tournament was being put on a ticking clock. The backlash to the age limit was even worse than the backlash to the letters. Arnold Palmer publicly stated that a champion should know when it's time to quit and shouldn't need a committee to tell him. The pressure mounted. Augusta National realized they had stepped on a landmine. They were alienating the very legends that made their tournament famous. So, in classic Augusta fashion, they executed a quiet retreat. Just 1 year after announcing the age limit, they retracted it. They announced that past champions could continue to play as long as they liked. On the surface, it looked like a victory for the players. It looked like tradition had won. The lifetime exemption was restored. But that is not what actually happened. Because Augusta National never really surrendered. They just changed their tactics. The lifetime exemption was back, but it came with a new, unwritten clause. The committee made it known, quietly and behind closed doors, that they expected past champions to voluntarily step down when their games were no longer competitive. They wouldn't send you a letter. They wouldn't force you out with an age limit. But if you went out and shot 90, you would receive a quiet conversation, a tap on the shoulder, a heavy suggestion that perhaps this year should be your last. It was a brilliant, ruthless compromise. Augusta kept their television product clean, and they avoided the public relations nightmare of officially banning their own champions. But the damage was already done. The illusion was broken. Every player who puts on a green jacket today knows the truth. They know that the lifetime exemption is a myth. They know that Augusta National is watching their scores, tracking their distances, and waiting for the day when they become a liability to the brand. Think about what is happening right now. You have guys like Bernhard Langer, Fred Couples, Jose Maria Olazabal, legends of the game. They are still teeing it up. They are still making cuts occasionally. But they know that the clock is ticking. They know that the moment they post a score that embarrasses the tournament, the quiet conversation is coming. And it's not just the older guys. It's the current stars. Scottie Scheffler, Jon Rahm, Hideki Matsuyama. They all know that the green jacket comes with terms and conditions. The club has proven that they will prioritize the brand over the player every single time. This isn't about pace of play. It isn't about protecting the course. It is about control. Who decides when a champion is done? Does the player get to walk away on their own terms, or does a committee of businessmen force them out the back door? Doug Ford passed away in 2018. He kept coming to the Champions Dinner every year. He kept wearing his green jacket. He never complained publicly. He handled his exile with a grace that Augusta National probably didn't deserve. But the letter he received in 2002 permanently changed the sport. It proved that no matter how many majors you win, no matter how famous you are, no matter how much history you have built, you are still just a guest on their property. The Masters is the greatest tournament in the world. But beneath the azaleas, beneath the piano music, beneath the polished tradition, there is a boardroom that will cut you loose the second you stop being useful. When you cut the field, when you revoke the exemptions, when you force the legends out through secret letters and whispered conversations, you do not get a better tournament. You get exactly what we are seeing right now. A sanitized, corporate product that lacks the very soul that made it famous in the first place. That is the real story of the Masters Blacklist. If you think Augusta National was right to protect their tournament, or if you think they completely betrayed their champions, I want to know. Drop your verdict in the comments right now. This is a debate that still divides the locker room today. And if you want more of these untold, behind-the-scenes stories from the PGA Tour, hit that subscribe button. The tour is changing faster than ever, and we are tracking every single move. I'll see you in the next one.